The invitation to the Galactic Council's demonstration arrived as a quiet shock to Earth. The message, encoded in a way no human could decipher without assistance, was a mix of condescending arrogance and grandiose promises. The alien species behind the invitation, 7 in total, were the epitome of galactic power, each one more advanced than humanity could imagine. The Council ruled over hundreds of star systems and had spent centuries perfecting a weapon capable of annihilating entire planets with a single command. They believed they were doing humanity a favor by extending an invitation to see their latest creation. At first, Earth's leaders thought it was a trap, a way for the aliens to test their resolve, or perhaps a subtle way of mocking humanity's technological limitations. But then came the argument no government could ignore. This could be the moment to ensure humanity's place in the cosmos. Dr. Lucas Harding, a weapons expert and a rising star in the newly formed human military R&D branch, was chosen to represent Earth. He had a reputation for pushing boundaries and a calm demeanor that made him an ideal candidate for such an important task. His heart raced with excitement. This wasn't just a diplomatic mission. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to witness the galaxy's most powerful technology up close. But he had more than curiosity driving him. Harding had been working on his own secret project, a weapon designed to put humanity on equal footing with the Council. He didn't intend to simply observe the aliens' technology. He intended to learn from it. Humanity's leaders, meanwhile, were cautious. The Council's invitation was unprecedented. Earth had always been seen as a minor player in galactic politics, its military nothing more than a blip on the radar of the vast, interstellar powerhouses that dominated the galaxy. If the invitation was genuine, it might be an opportunity for Earth to gain a seat at the table of the galaxy's most influential species. But there was also fear, a creeping suspicion that the invitation could be a test of humanity's vulnerability. The Council made it clear that the test would take place in a neutral sector of space, a place far from any inhabited worlds, a barren system far from prying eyes. The demonstration would be held on an empty moon, where no harm could be done to civilian populations. There, the 7 species would reveal their newest weapon, a planet killer capable of erasing entire worlds with the press of a button. The aliens promised it would be a spectacle, a glimpse into the future of galactic power. Harding's orders were clear: observe, learn, and most importantly, don't engage. But as he prepared for the journey, a different thought lingered in his mind. He wasn't there just to witness history. He was there to make it. The journey to the neutral sector was long, but Dr. Lucas Harding's mind was occupied by more than the vast emptiness of space. As the Earth delegation's ship coasted through the stars, Harding pored over data from the Council's previous demonstrations, piecing together what little information had been leaked. His thoughts circled around one fact: humanity could never hope to compete with the technology the aliens had at their disposal, not with brute force alone. They had to play this game differently. The aliens, with their advanced mental and physical capabilities, had long considered humanity to be primitive, an upstart species that had only recently figured out how to leave their homeworld. They were a curiosity at best, a possible ally at worst. The humans' technology was raw compared to theirs, but there was one thing humanity possessed that none of the 7 species could ever replicate: their adaptability, their relentless ingenuity, and their hunger to survive. Harding had spent the weeks leading up to the mission fine-tuning a proposal, one that could change the entire trajectory of humanity's place in the galaxy. If he played his cards right, Earth could gain far more than just a place at the table. They could seize control. As they approached the designated moon, which was nestled in a forgotten corner of the galaxy, Harding was briefed on the details of the test. The weapon would be activated in 3 stages. First, a demonstration of raw power to show the destructive capability of the weapon. Next, a controlled strike on an uninhabited planet, one that would prove it could eradicate a world. And finally, a voluntary target, one chosen by the Council to test the weapon's limits. The aliens spoke of this final test with such confidence that Harding wondered if they even understood how much they had already underestimated the humans. Upon arrival, Harding met with the alien representatives. The 7 species that made up the Galactic Council were an eclectic mix. Tall, thin creatures with translucent skin, hulking forms of metal and organic matter fused together, creatures who communicated through light and sound, and beings whose entire presence existed as fluctuating energy fields. Despite their differences, they all exuded an air of superiority. The leader of the council, a being known as Threnic from the planet Shkor, a species renowned for its wisdom and telepathic abilities, welcomed the humans. His voice was calm, almost patronizing. "Welcome, Dr. Harding. I trust you will find our demonstration enlightening. We believe it is time for your species to understand your place in the universe." But Harding didn't flinch. Instead, he smiled, a smile that hid far more than anyone could ever guess. "I'm sure it will be a sight to behold," he said. "But before we begin, I have a proposition." Threnic's eyes narrowed slightly, his mind probing for any hidden agenda. "Proceed," he said with a flicker of curiosity. "I believe humanity can assist you," Harding continued, his voice steady. "Our weapon research has advanced considerably. If we were to combine our technologies, perhaps we could achieve something truly revolutionary. In exchange, of course, for full membership in the Council." The aliens fell silent, exchanging wary glances. Threnic's expression remained neutral, but Harding could see the glimmer of doubt in his eyes. This was no ordinary proposition. Humans were not supposed to be making such offers. But Harding wasn't done yet. "You're right to be cautious," he said, sensing their hesitation. "You've made incredible advancements, but we have something you don't. A fresh perspective, a different way of thinking. Let us help you improve your weapon." Threnic finally spoke, his tone careful. "And what do you want in return, Dr. Harding?" "Full access to the Council's knowledge," Harding said, his voice unwavering. "Full access and a seat at the table. Humanity's future isn't as far behind it as you might think. This could be the beginning of a new era." The silence stretched. Harding watched as the alien leaders mulled over the offer, the weight of it settling in. Finally, Threnic nodded slowly, his voice calm but tinged with suspicion. "We will consider your proposal, but know this, Dr. Harding. Our weapon is not something to be trifled with. We will see if your species is truly worthy of the power you seek." The bait was set, and Harding's plan was set in motion. The test of the weapon would begin soon, but Dr. Harding wasn't there just to witness it. He was there to change everything. The alien fleet loomed in the distance, an intimidating array of vessels that spanned across the barren moon's horizon. As Dr. Harding and the rest of the human delegation were ushered onto the observation platform, they could hear the low hum of machinery and the occasional distant roar of engines coming from the alien ships. The atmosphere was tense, the aliens' energy palpable in the cold vacuum of space. It was clear that this wasn't just a test, it was a statement. The moon, where the test would be conducted, was desolate and lifeless. Stark gray craters dotted the landscape, remnants of long-forgotten impacts. The Council had chosen this place, so far from any inhabited system, to ensure there were no unintended consequences. Dr. Harding could feel the weight of the moment as he surveyed the vast emptiness before him, knowing full well that whatever happened next could change everything for humanity. Threnic, the leader of the Council, stood beside him, his elongated form radiating calm as his telepathic powers buzzed through the air. "You will witness the power of our species," Threnic said, his voice deep and rich with authority. "No weapon in the galaxy compares to this." A ripple of anticipation ran through the crowd of alien representatives. Their expressions were unreadable, but Harding saw something else behind their eyes. Pride. The kind of pride that comes from years of perfection, the belief that nothing could surpass their achievements. It made Harding smile. "Ready the weapon," Threnic commanded. At the center of the platform, a massive structure came to life. It was a towering machine, built into the surface of the moon, its energy pulse glowing ominously. The weapon, codenamed Oblivion, was the pinnacle of alien technology, a system of planetary destruction that could wipe out entire civilizations with a single blast. The Council's members had boasted about its power, claiming it could incinerate entire worlds in the blink of an eye. Oblivion, Frennick continued, his voice cool, is the result of centuries of advancement. Watch as it fires. Harding stood at the edge of the platform, watching as the weapon powered up. The sky above them darkened as a deep blue light flickered, followed by a bright surge of energy from the weapon's core. For a moment, the entire moon seemed to tremble, and then, with a terrible, deafening pulse, the weapon fired. A massive beam of energy shot into space, streaking across the void toward a distant planet. The planet, a cold, lifeless world chosen for its isolation, glowed briefly before the energy hit. The result was spectacular, but not as catastrophic as the Council had promised. The beam cracked the surface of the planet, creating a massive rift that sent shockwaves through its atmosphere. But the world did not disintegrate. It was scared, damaged beyond recognition, but it remained intact. The aliens stood silent, their pride momentarily shattered. Harding watched as the aliens' expressions shifted from confidence to unease. The weapon had failed to meet their expectations. Frennick's eyes narrowed. It seems the power was not as great as we hoped, he muttered, his voice laced with frustration. Harding, however, felt a surge of excitement. The cracks in the Council's dominance were beginning to show, and that meant opportunity. Perhaps, Harding said, his tone casual, there is a way to optimize its power. He let the suggestion hang in the air, knowing full well that the alien species, so used to their own superiority, wouldn't resist the idea of improving what they had created. He wasn't there to be an observer. He was there to take control. Frennick's gaze turned to him, his eyes piercing. And how do you propose to do that? Harding smiled, hiding his triumph. Let me show you. The moment of hesitation stretched on, the crackling silence of the alien delegation thick with uncertainty. Harding stood in front of them, calculating his next move. The weapon, Oblivion, had failed to live up to its mythic reputation, and the Council's facade of invincibility had begun to crumble. He could sense their growing discomfort. Prideful beings who had long considered themselves at the pinnacle of technological achievement were now faced with a humbling truth. Their planet-killer weapon wasn't as perfect as they believed. Frennick's narrowed eyes met Harding's, his mind clearly calculating the next steps. The leader's telepathic abilities hummed with uncertainty, but there was also curiosity, a dangerous flicker that Harding had hoped for. If he played this right, he could force their hand. They had no choice but to listen to him now. You claim humanity has mastered weapons of similar scale, Frennick finally said, his voice thick with skepticism. But I doubt your primitive species has created anything that can compare to this. His words were clipped, challenging. Harding remained composed, his face an unreadable mask. You're right. What I'm proposing isn't something you've seen before, he said, but it can make this. He gestured to the massive wreckage of the failed test. Look like a mere spark. Give me access to your systems, and I'll recalibrate your weapon. I'll make it work beyond anything you can imagine. The alien representatives murmured amongst themselves, the air crackling with an uneasy energy. Harding knew what was coming. Their pride would make them either reluctant allies or bitter enemies. Frennick, despite his wariness, was intrigued. The Council's collective mind began to accept the inevitability of his proposal. You would risk the integrity of our creation, Frennick asked, a note of challenge in his voice. You would allow a human to modify something this powerful? Not just a human, Harding replied smoothly, his voice unwavering. A human who has studied the flaws you didn't even realize existed in your system. Think of it as an upgrade. You're already using outdated components, and your energy regulation protocols could be more efficient. I have the solution to make it permanent. I only need the access codes." The tension was thick as the alien council members exchanged silent glances. Harding could feel their hesitation, their reluctance to give up control. But it was clear they didn't have a choice. They couldn't deny that their own weapon had failed. In their arrogance, they hadn't anticipated that a lesser species might possess the insight they lacked. After what felt like an eternity, Frennick spoke again, his voice a mixture of challenge and intrigue. "Very well," he said. "You will have access. But understand this, should you fail, you will pay the price. The integrity of the galaxy's balance depends on the success of this weapon." Harding nodded, his heart racing. This was it. The first step to altering the course of galactic power was now in motion. As the alien delegates parted to give him access to the weapon's control interface, Harding felt a surge of triumph, but also a deep, focused concentration. He was about to get more than just access. He was going to take control of the most powerful weapon in the galaxy, and he would use it to reshape everything. The alien systems flickered on as Harding approached the glowing console, a rush of alien code streaming before his eyes. He let his fingers dance across the interface, quickly deciphering the system's architecture. But it wasn't just about manipulation. This was about more than recalibrating the weapon's power. Harding had something else in mind, something far more dangerous. As the data streams flowed, Harding whispered to himself, "Let's see how far we can push this." The weapon, once a symbol of the Council's dominance, was now humanity's to command. The alien control room hummed with activity, but the air felt heavy with an unspoken tension. Harding stood before the massive console, his fingers flying across the interface, inputting commands and manipulating the systems with the ease of someone who had studied the intricacies of the technology for weeks. As the alien code merged with human logic, the device began to respond in ways that no one, not even the Council, had anticipated. Frennick hovered nearby, his piercing telepathic gaze boring into Harding, scanning his every move. Harding could sense the alien leader's doubt turning into a sort of reluctant fascination. The other council members, some of whom had remained silent until now, began to murmur among themselves. Their voices were low, but Harding could hear snippets of their conversations. There was unease in the air, a fear of the unknown. Harding was no longer just an observer, a minor player in the game. He was a force that could change everything. The final test of the weapon was scheduled to occur in mere hours. It would be the demonstration of its ultimate power, a live strike on a carefully selected target, a peaceful, uninhabited planet, meant to showcase the weapon's sheer destructive potential. But the tension in the room suggested the Council was no longer focused on the target. Their attention had shifted entirely to Harding and his methodical work on the control panel. "You've been working for some time now, Dr. Harding," Frennick said, his voice smooth but tinged with suspicion. "You claim to be improving our technology, but I wonder if you understand what you're dealing with. This is more than just a weapon. It's a symbol of our power, a tool forged over centuries." Harding didn't look up from the console, his focus unwavering. "I understand more than you think, Frennick," he said coolly. "I'm just making sure the weapon lives up to its potential. The universe won't remember it for being just a tool of destruction. They'll remember it for being something far greater." The council leader's eyes flickered with uncertainty, but Harding could see his resolve beginning to break down. The truth was, the weapon was already flawed. It had never been as perfect as they believed. The aliens had spent so long basking in their own superiority that they had missed the small, subtle mistakes, gaps in the design, inefficiencies in the energy distribution, and vulnerabilities in the targeting systems. But Harding had already solved those issues. He had recalibrated the energy matrix, making it far more potent than anyone could imagine. It was almost time to test it. The alien representatives began to gather around, their gazes locked on Harding. He felt their fear. At first, it had been subtle, but now it was palpable. The truth was dawning on them. They had given him control over the weapon. "You understand what you're doing, Dr. Harding?" one of the aliens asked, his voice trembling slightly. Harding turned, his face calm but his eyes gleaming with purpose. "Of course," he said, "I'm giving you the power to rule the galaxy. But remember, in exchange, humanity wants a seat at the table. We're no longer just your guests. We're your equals." Frennick stiffened at the boldness of the demand. But Harding knew the Council had little choice now. They needed his technology, desperately. The power was already in his hands, and if they refused, they would lose it all. "Do you accept?" Harding pressed. The room was silent, the weight of the decision hanging heavily in the air. Finally, Frennick nodded, albeit reluctantly. "Very well," he said, his voice resigned. "You will have your seat at the table. But remember, Dr. Harding, power comes with consequences." Harding smiled, a cold, knowing smile. "Consequences are something we can handle." The game had officially begun, and humanity was no longer a spectator. It was time to test the full force of their new weapon, and the galaxy would never be the same. The control room was alive with anticipation as the countdown to the final test began. Harding stood at the center of the massive platform, his fingers hovering over the console, waiting for the signal to proceed. The atmosphere had shifted. The Council, once confident in their absolute superiority, was now subdued. They watched him warily, knowing that whatever happened next would either affirm their power or destroy it. Harding could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him, but he didn't flinch. He was no longer just a scientist from Earth. He was the architect of a new order. Frennick stood beside him, his telepathic senses probing the air, scanning for any hint of subversion in Harding's mind. But Harding's mind was a fortress. He had already anticipated every possible move. He had gained access to the most advanced weapons technology in the galaxy, and now it was time to push it to its limits. The alien leaders would soon realize that they had made a grave mistake in trusting him with their ultimate weapon. "Proceed with the test," Frennick commanded, his voice calm, but Harding could detect the flicker of doubt behind it. The others were silent, the weight of the moment pressing down on them. Harding's fingers danced across the console, unlocking the hidden sequence of commands. He wasn't just activating Oblivion's power, he was amplifying it. The energy matrix that had once been calibrated for a single, controlled strike now pulsed with a new intensity. The weapon was no longer just capable of destroying planets. It was about to tap into something far more dangerous. A power that could reshape entire star systems in an instant. The weapon's core began to hum, a low, vibrating sound that resonated deep in the bones of every living being in the room. The sky above darkened, an unnatural eclipse as the energy began to coalesce into a swirling vortex above the lunar surface. Harding felt a surge of adrenaline as the weapon's full potential came alive under his fingertips. "Dr. Harding." Frennick's voice was sharp now, laced with an undertone of alarm. "What are you doing?" Harding turned slowly, meeting the alien leader's gaze. "I'm not just testing the weapon," he said calmly. "I'm making sure that it's truly capable of what you've promised." His voice took on a darker edge. "After all, if we're going to use this technology, shouldn't we be certain that it's perfect?" Before Frennick could respond, the weapon's core released a sudden burst of energy, a shockwave that rattled the lunar surface beneath their feet. The beam of destruction, which had previously been a controlled strike, now spiraled out of control, its intensity increasing exponentially. The moon trembled violently, and the ground cracked open in fissures, as if the very surface of reality was being torn apart. The alien representatives took a step back, their calm veneer shattering in the face of such raw power. Frennick's expression flickered with panic for the first time. The weapon was no longer obeying their commands. It was consuming itself, its energy escalating beyond anything they had designed. "Stop it," one of the alien leaders shouted. "This is not part of the test." Harding's fingers flew across the console, his heart racing with exhilaration. This was what he had been working toward, a test not just of the weapon, but of their control over it, and it was clear now that they had none. "You're right," he said softly, almost to himself. "This isn't part of the test." The weapon's core hummed louder, a shrieking crescendo as the energy stabilized into a massive beam that now arced outwards, its trajectory aimed directly at the heart of the distant planet, a world long thought to be safe. The beam was no longer merely destructive. It was a cataclysmic force, a harbinger of a new, terrifying era. Frennick moved toward Harding, his mind desperately trying to seize control, but Harding was ready. The Council had never expected humanity to possess the courage, or the audacity, to take their technology and push it to its breaking point. "You see," Harding said, stepping back, "I wasn't here to observe. I was here to test the true potential of the weapon. And now, you'll see exactly what happens when humanity decides to take control." The beam of energy surged forward, racing across the void, its power unmatched by anything the galaxy had ever seen. The massive beam of energy surged through the void, its trajectory unwavering as it raced toward the distant planet. The surface of the moon trembled under the intensity of the blast, the light from the weapon casting eerie shadows across the alien delegation. Harding watched with a calm detachment, his hands still resting on the console, manipulating the weapon's energy pulse, guiding it to its inevitable target. The council members, their eyes wide with disbelief, seemed rooted in place, paralyzed by the raw, overwhelming power of the weapon they had once controlled so confidently. Frennick's voice cracked with urgency. "Stop it, Dr. Harding. You've gone too far." Harding didn't respond. He had long passed the point of no return. The weapon, designed to be a symbol of the Council's indomitable might, was now an extension of his will. He had rewritten its programming, amplified its destructive power, and unleashed it on the very planet they had chosen to demonstrate it on. But the truth was, the destruction wasn't the goal. No, the goal was far more ambitious. The beam struck the planet with the force of 1,000 suns. For a moment, the planet's atmosphere flared with light so bright, it seemed as though the entire system had collapsed into the singularity of destruction. The energy pulse tore through the planet's crust, rupturing it in seconds, sending seismic waves that shattered its surface. The ground buckled, the oceans evaporated, and the once vibrant planet was reduced to a lifeless husk, scorched and broken. There was nothing left but a massive debris field, a violent testament to the power Harding had unleashed. The shockwave from the destruction of the planet reverberated through the control room, shaking the very foundations of the moon they stood on. Alien delegates stumbled, their expressions a mixture of awe, terror, and confusion. Harding stepped away from the console, his face still unreadable. He had made his point. The weapon's power was no longer a myth. The galaxy had witnessed firsthand what humanity was capable of, what humanity could control. For a long moment, there was silence, broken only by the distant hum of the weapon's dying energy pulse. It was a silence that spoke volumes, louder than any words could. The council members looked at each other, their earlier arrogance shattered. They had thought they were the apex species, their technology untouchable. Now they were faced with the undeniable truth. Humanity had surpassed them in a single violent stroke. Frennick was the first to speak, his voice low and filled with something approaching fear. "What have you done? You've wiped out an entire planet. A system. An entire ecosystem. This is madness." Harding turned to face him, his expression cold, his voice steady. "No, Frennick, this is a warning. A warning to the galaxy, and to your council. You're not the only ones with the power to destroy. You're not the only ones who can wield this kind of weapon." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the stunned alien faces. "Now, you have a choice. You can either acknowledge the new order I've just shown you, or you can try to stop it. But know this, humanity is not a pawn anymore. We're the players, and we'll decide how this game is played from here on out." The gravity of his words settled in the room. The aliens, for the first time in their long, superior history, felt the sting of true vulnerability. Harding had set the stage. The weapon had proven its power. And now, with humanity's unexpected rise to the forefront of galactic politics, there was no going back. The Council was at a crossroads, and they knew it. The galaxy would never see them as the rulers it once had. They had underestimated humanity, and that mistake would cost them everything. As the moon's surface continued to tremble beneath their feet, Harding's eyes narrowed with cold resolve. This was just the beginning. The devastation was almost too much to comprehend. The planet, once a serene, untouched world, had been obliterated in a single violent stroke. The debris cloud that now drifted in the void was a stark reminder of humanity's newfound power. The Council stood in stunned silence, the weight of their failure crushing down on them. They had watched as their weapon had spiraled out of control, and now they were left to grapple with the consequences. Harding, however, was calm. In fact, he was more confident than ever. He had done what few could even imagine. He had rewritten the rules of the game. Thrennic's voice broke the stillness, but it was no longer commanding. It was almost pleading. "This is madness. You've wiped out an entire system. You've gone too far." Harding met his gaze without flinching. "You had your chance to show the galaxy what you were capable of, Thrennic," he said, his voice low and steady. "Now the galaxy knows what humanity is capable of." The alien leader recoiled, the full weight of Harding's words sinking in. His species had once been the unquestioned rulers of the galaxy, their technology unmatched, their might feared. But now they were staring into the void, the remnants of their pride shattered. The moment was irreversible. The power had shifted, and Harding could feel it. The balance had tipped in humanity's favor. "We didn't ask for this," another alien delegate spoke up, a deep-throated creature whose form rippled with energy. "We didn't seek to dominate. We only wanted peace." "Peace," Harding scoffed, his tone dripping with disdain. "You think you've ever known peace? You've ruled over civilizations, crushed rebellions, manipulated entire systems from the shadows. That was your idea of peace. Control." The alien trembled at the accusation, but Harding was already moving on. The next phase had begun. The Council's defeat was not just symbolic. It was a declaration. Humanity was no longer on the fringes, begging for scraps of galactic power. They were in control now, and the rules had changed forever. "We'll help you rebuild," Harding continued, his voice shifting, no longer as cold but with a firm, almost pitying edge. "We'll help you regain your status. We'll even let you keep your seats in the Council, on one condition." The aliens, desperate and now willing to listen, leaned forward, their pride broken but their survival instincts intact. "And what's that condition?" Thrennic asked cautiously, though his voice betrayed a hint of both hope and fear. "You let humanity sit at the table as equals," Harding said, his gaze unwavering. "No more subjugation. No more half-steps. If we're going to rule, we rule together, and we decide what happens next. The galaxy will no longer be your playground." The Council leaders exchanged looks, faint glimmers of defiance still flickering in their eyes, but tempered with the undeniable realization that they had no leverage left. The power had shifted. Humanity had taken control of the weapon, of the moment, and of the future. Thrennic nodded slowly, the resignation in his eyes deepening. "Very well. You have your place." Harding smiled. "Then let's begin." The galaxy had witnessed the destruction of one world, but now the real work was about to start. Humanity had taken the first step toward becoming the true rulers of the stars. The Council might still exist in name, but the new order had already been set in motion, and this time the human race would shape it. The universe would never be the same again.